Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for watching this tutorial. What I'm going to show you is how you can use the Mocha tracker and the Mocha import script to do some corner pinning. The only thing that you really have to take care of is that you don't, by accident, destroy your image. Before we start, I will give you a brief overview over the project. In step 1, we are going to use the Mocha tracker to track the movement of the picture frame. In step 2, we are going to apply this track in After Effects, and in step 3, we add the funny effect at the end where I destroy the image. Let's look at the details. In step 1, you learn all the details of tracking in Mocha. You learn how to import a clip, set the right tracking parameters, adjust your track after tracking to get more accurate results, and finally you also learn how to export the data in the right format. In step 2, we look at two different solutions. If you have Red Giant Warp installed, the first variant is for you. It is more convenient and easier to apply, and also looks a little bit better due to the high quality warps that are possible with Red Giant Warp. For all of you that don't have Red Giant Warp installed, I also show an alternative solution that does not require any additional plugins. For this, I also show you a nice trick how to make motion blur, even if your version of Mocha has no support for motion blur built in. Finally, the detach image effect will not be covered in this tutorial, but in the second part. There I will also show you a cool application of the tracker to mask script, so be sure to not miss this second part. But now it's time to start right at the beginning with step 1, tracking in Mocha. Okay, so here I'm now in Mocha, where I want to track the picture frame, and I'm using Mocha version 1.2, which is included in After Effects CS4. You can also do the same with any newer version of Mocha, or Mocha for After Effects. Click on this icon to create a new project, and we click here to import the clip that we want to track. In my case it's an image sequence, so a series of TIFF images. I just select the first one and hit Open or Öffnen here in the German interface. Then you can leave here basically everything as it is. Next, here also everything as it is. Again go to next, and here we change the frame rate, which is default here 10 frames per second, to 25, because I recorded with 25 images per second. All the rest is again fine as it is, and click on Finish. Now here we have now our image sequence and can scroll through it, and before we actually start tracking, I want to ensure here that everything is checked, so any kind of motion should be tracked, also shear and perspective motion. And now let's look at our image sequence here from the beginning. Here I'm talking a little bit, this intro, and around here, maybe here is the time where the picture frame should, or where the picture inside the frame should occur. Maybe a little bit, whatever, maybe. So maybe around here, it doesn't matter. Better start tracking a little bit earlier than the point where you want the picture frame to occur. So what I do is with this icon here, I draw a shape around the picture frame, and in this case I'm trying to draw it quite precisely. With right mouse click you can stop, and then I drag here to make sharp corners, and so this defines the area that Mocha should track. You can also correct it later. You can see here you get a zoom detail that you can, where you can put the corners precisely. Actually, it doesn't matter to get them so precise, but in this case I figured out that a precise shape works better. So also try, if this doesn't work, to draw a shape like 2 or 3 millimeters bigger than the frame, sometimes this also works better, because then you can also track the border of it, so the contour of it better. Whatever. So an interesting thing here is if I click on Matte, you can see the area that is going to be tracked. And one thing we do not want to have, that currently you see that the entire inside here of the picture frame is also red. And we do not want this to be tracked also. So therefore we go on this here, add X spline to layer, not the one here we used before, but this one. And draw another shape. Like this. Again, right click to finish. And in this case, I do not pull here the edges to make it sharper, because these corners are actually, I do not pull here the corners because these corners are quite informative. So it's nice, if you click again on Matte, to include here these rounded parts also into the tracking. In this case, it just works better, so I leave it like this. So this track, or each track in Mocha, is always on a separate layer. So this is the first layer we have here, and we click on it and name it, call it track 1. And this is just because later we have to do further tracks and we want to have them in the same project and want to keep everything clean. So once you've defined here your tracking area and made sure that, so select it and make sure that perspective is enabled. Oh, why did it disappear again? Now we can click here to track the motion forward. Now you can see that Mocha tracks this here quite nicely. You can also see that it takes a while, so I'm going to fast forward until the track leaves the frame. So now you can see that the picture frame slowly starts leaving here the frame of the video, and nevertheless Mocha has no problems in tracking it, and we wait until it completely left. Okay, now it gets irritated a little bit. So we go back to this point here and adjust it a little. So this one here, and then we can click here to just track a single frame. Now you see it works better, and here again it does something we do not want, but nevertheless at this point I think we do not need the track anymore. So oops, sorry, at this point here. So now you can see we have all this here nicely tracked. The only thing that is missing is that we set the surface area. So we click here, and what you see now is such a blue rectangle, and this actually defines the area that we want to track, or where we want to later have our corner pin inserted. Yeah. So these are the 4 corner pin edges of the corner pin effect we are going to use in Mocha. So they are not set with these tools here, but really with clicking on surface and then setting this blue rectangle. I can also here click on matte to deactivate the mattes, and I also do not want to see here the splines, and also not this one. So now basically everything that is left are here the blue corner pin window, and you can see that it fits the track quite nicely. So in case it does not work that perfectly, or here you can see at the end it's somehow a little bit too high or so, you can also correct it now afterwards. So for example, here this point is not 100% correct, so what we go therefore to is to the adjust track, and we can zoom in here a little bit, and what you now do is basically just keyframe here. But you can also only do this in this adjust track mode, yeah, not otherwise. And you can scroll here along, and you see here in the left corner always a preview of where the corner is and where it should be. So you can grab it here and move it appropriately. And you can see here the green points. So these basically allow you to let's use the hand to keyframe these points exactly. So here the track starts. Now if you look here, you can see that now it fits quite nicely to the corner. It's just a few corrections. And now you can do it again with the other corners. So I just drag it here precisely where it should be, move along until it doesn't fit anymore. So here it's obviously not 100% correct, maybe like this. Okay, and in the same way you can also correct the other corners until everything is correct. After finishing these corners, you might also need to, I go back here to the track, and you might need to set this blue corner pin area again separately, new. Now you can see it moves much better. So really, if the blue thing does not 100% fit to your frame, go to the adjust track, adjust your track, and afterwards set the blue rectangle, the corner pin here, the surface rectangle again, and it will fit much better. So once you have finished tracking, you select the layer here again and go to export tracking data. And then the kind of tracking data you want to store is here the corner pin data. If you use newer versions of Mocha, you have several kinds of corner pin data that you can export, and there's one where it's particularly written that it's compatible with Red Giant Warp and Mocha Import, so you need this one for Red Giant Warp and Mocha Import compatibility. In the old version 1.2 it's very simple, just here's this corner pin data. So click on save. I'm not going to do it because I have already saved a copy of it. Go to save and save the thing to a file. Okay, now this was the first part. Let me just zoom here out again. So this was the first part, and you can see here it leaves the frame, and now the frame occurs again. And so for this second part where the frame again occurs, we of course also need a track, but this time we're going to track it backwards from the point where the picture frame should disappear. And it should disappear about here. So from this frame again, we click on this icon and draw a second shape. Oh, you've seen we've deactivated the visibility of the splines. I right click to stop. So click here to see the splines. And you see that now we have track 1 and layer 2 is our new track. So I'm going to rename this to track 2. And for track 1, I'm going to switch off its visibility and also switch off this here, which is that it's going to be tracked. So we do not want to track track 1 anymore, but just track 2 from now on. So we disable this here. And we can also lock it to avoid changing it by accident. So, and now basically everything works as in the first time. So I drag, oh sorry, undo. I drag here the corners to make them sharp. You have to move a little bit. You can also set the blue surface already before tracking. This basically doesn't matter when you set the surface rectangle, either before or after tracking. Okay, I also can disable here the visibility of the surface to be again able to create this one, this inner spline that removes the inside from the area that I'm going to track. Right click to finish. Here I can adjust it a little bit. And now I said we want to track from this frame here backwards, so we hit this here, track backwards instead of here tracking forward, and then let Mocha again do its work. So this again takes a while, and I'm not going to wait until it's finished. So once this is finished, you have to do exactly the same again. So select your track layer and click on export to export it into this corner pin format. And after you did that, you also need to do a search track for the third part where we want to destroy the background. This works exactly in the same manner. So I'm not going to repeat this process again, but instead now jump right into After Effects and assume that you already have exported your 3 tracking parts. Okay, so here we are now in After Effects for the second part, and I already prepared a project here with our plate footage, and I'm going to drag it into a new comp. So here is our footage now, and what we are going to do is that we are going to duplicate this plate by hitting Ctrl D and rename it to track 1. And now we go to the point where the picture should occur. So maybe around here. This is looking a little bit strange. Maybe better this one here. Okay. And we set there the in point, and then we go to the point where the frame about here, maybe one further, one here, where it disappeared again. So now we have here a copy with exactly just the part that we are interested in for the first track. And now we right click here and go to time freeze frame. And what this makes is that now over this time in this layer, the entire clip is frozen. So we basically have just the part that we want to corner pin. So the next thing we do is that we draw a mask around this corner pin area here. I draw it about here, roughly in the middle, not exactly in the inner edges. Hit MM to reveal the mask feather and feather it a bit, maybe 9 pixels. And now you can see that we have now here a still image of what we want to corner pin. Yeah. Maybe we can feather it even more, 20 or so. The idea of this feathering is that if the track later is not perfect, this will somehow compensate for it. Okay. Now, okay, the last thing that obviously needs to be done here is to really corner pin it. So for this we are going to use my script Mocha import, and once you've downloaded and installed it, you get it here by Window. Then you can choose, see I have here a lot of different scripts, and one of them is now Mocha import. It opens up here in the interface, and it consists of 3 simple steps. So in the first step you load the tracking data. Click here, and I already saved here these 3 tracks in Mocha, so I choose the first one, it's a corner pin, and click OK. Now it shows me, okay, you've tracked 819 frames. This might differ in your case depending on how long exactly the track is that you've tracked. Frame rate 25 frames, and the only thing it needs to know is whether the video we tracked starts at the beginning of the comp or at a later point. In this case, it starts really, I mean the video we imported into Mocha was the one here, this plate, and it starts at the beginning of the comp, so just hit OK. So the second step, once you loaded your data, is to choose here what do you want to do with it. And in this case, what we want to do is we choose here the red giant warp corner pin selected layer, keep current frame. And the idea of this is, okay, at this very first frame here, this one, the corner pin looks already perfectly right. Okay, we just want to keep it as it is and just move the rest accordingly. And this is exactly obtained by this keep current frame option. So we select this layer, choose here the red giant warp corner pin keep selected frame, and hit apply. And what we now have is a corner pin, and you see that in this picture or in this frame actually nothing changed. Yeah, but if we now see here, it nicely moves accordingly. Yeah? So the intermediate result now looks as follows. So this already looks quite convincing, but if you look at it in detail, you will notice that the picture is much sharper than the part around it while it moves. So this looks a little bit unrealistic, and what is actually missing here is motion blur. And the only thing that you need to add motion blur in Red Giant Warp with the Red Giant Warp corner pin is actually to just enable it. So you can set here the motion blur for the layer and enable it also here for the comp, and now everything is rendered with motion blur. And you can see the difference. For example, here, if I disable the motion blur, the image gets sharp while the frame around it is not so sharp, and you enable it, you see that immediately here the image also has motion blur and looks more realistic by that. So let's just clean this up here a little. In particular, I want at around this point here the corner pin starts, so we don't need to render this layer before, just to speed things up. And here it disappears, so let's set here the out point of the layer. And so if you have Red Giant Warp with exactly the same technique, you can also then create the second and third part of the corner pin. But now for the second part, I'm going to show you how you can do it without the Red Giant Warp plugin, but just with the After Effects built-in corner pin functions. Okay, so if you don't have Red Giant Warp, you can do all these effects also. It's just a little bit more complicated and might just look a little bit worse than with the Red Giant Warp. But now let's explore this second option. So if you don't have Red Giant Warp, the first thing is exactly the same. You duplicate your background layer and go to the range that you want the corner pin to be in. So in this case, the corner pin should end maybe around here. Like this. And it starts here where the picture frame has left the comp completely. Like here. Okay, let's go here to the end and check again here time freeze frame to make it a freeze frame. And now the only thing that differs is we manually need to take care that now we create an image of exactly this shape here that actually spans the entire comp. Because if you do a usual corner pin or CC power pin, you need an image that spans the entire comp. So the picture that you want to picture frame here, the corner pin here, needs to fit it, and we do this with an effect, namely with the under distortion you find not only the corner pin but also the CC power pin effect, and we apply it to our plate here, or to the duplicate of the plate. Actually, let's rename this here to track 2 and select the power pin effect, and we set the 4 corners of it to exactly the 4 corners of the image here. You can see this better if I disable the effect. So we set the 4 corners of the corner pin of the power pin effect here to the 4 corners of the image that we want to pin later. So let's zoom in here a little bit and place them correctly. Like this. And now we enable this power pin and go here, check this one, which is called unstretch. And now you see what happened is actually that the region we marked here is zoomed to full screen, and this is, or to the entire comp, fits the entire comp. This is exactly what we need. And on top of this, we can now apply a second power pin with the help of Mocha import. So we go here, we load our tracking data. This time we select the second track, of course. It again informs us that everything was imported correct and the footage started at the beginning of our comp. And now we select here CC power pin selected layer. So this is like a simple corner pin effect, but you have a few more options that will be handy later on. And we hit apply. Now you can see that the corner pin is nicely included here. And what you actually have here on the layer are now two corner pins on top of each other. The first one was the one that stretched our image from the small part to the entire comp, and then the second one here that now moves this corner pin as we need it, or as we tracked it in Mocha. So again, what is missing here so far is motion blur. Okay, and in newer versions of Mocha, there's actually motion blur built in, so you just have to export the corner pin data format that includes motion blur. But I'm going to show you now a trick how you can do it also, how you can also have motion blur in the old version of Mocha that does not support motion blur by itself. So the idea of it is that we use a blur effect. So we select here our layer that needs to be blurred and go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, and choose here Directional Blur, which just blurs into a certain direction. And what we need now somehow, I mean, if you look at this effect here, Directional Blur, it has two properties. The first is the direction in which the blur should happen. So, and the second one is the blur length, so how strong the blur is. So you can see if I pull this here up, we have a blur, and this blur goes into a specific direction. So I can turn it here like this, and it blurs the image into a specific direction. And what we basically want is to have both this blur length and also the direction driven by the movement of these corner pin points. Yeah, the faster they move, the stronger should be here, the larger should be the blur length, and it should also go into the direction that these points are currently moving in. And what I did is I prepared some expressions for you that you can readily directly use here. So I also put them to the downloads that you get to the tutorial. So here are two expressions that you can add by cut and paste. So I go to File or Edit Copy, or Control C to first copy the expression that gives me the blur direction. So I go here to Direction and Alt click on it, and then go to Control V to insert it. So you don't see anything here, but here now you can see that I just cut it and pasted this expression. And then I take the second expression, this one here, and paste it I alt click here on blur length like this, and also Control V to insert it. And so I don't want really to go over the details of this expression. The only thing is for the direction. So if you want to use this expression for other projects, the important thing is just that in the first two lines of the expression, let's better watch it here. Here you define from which point the movement should be taken. Yeah, in this case it said from this effect corner pin 2 take the bottom right corner. You can also look at other corners, maybe one of them works better. You could even imagine, but this is a task I leave up to you, to average the motion of 4 track points, or also of the 4 corners, which would probably even be better. But just to simplify things, I just capture here with these texts the movement of the bottom right, or I access the bottom right corner of the corner pin. And if you have a different corner pin effect, you just need to update this text here, CC power pin 2, accordingly. So if yours has a different name, just put the different name in here. And here all the magic happens that extracts the direction from the movement of this point. And here it's the same thing basically, that the blur length is determined, or it is captured or sampled from this point here. You have to adjust this text if you have a different effect. And also the strength of the blur can be influenced if you change this number here at the end. Yeah. So if you want to have a heavier blur, just make this number smaller. In this case, it's like I have a 25 frame rate, so 25 frames per second, then 50 works quite nice. Might be different, depends on your footage. Okay, so I've inserted here the two expressions, and now you can see that we have a nice blur. So you can see especially here, if I turn it off, the image gets sharp. If I turn it on, it's blurry, and in particular in points where I move slowly, like here, it is sharper than here where the image is heavily or is moving very fast, and therefore it is also blurred quite a lot. So this looks already quite nice. So the only thing that is left over now for the third part is a question how we do this destruction of the image at the end finally. But since this tutorial already got quite long, I think I will postpone this third part into a separate tutorial, so stay tuned. This is Matthias for marmoworld.com, and I hope you enjoyed it.